And welcome everyone to the Apptrepreneur Show. I am your host, Kevin the Apptrepreneur, and welcome to your near daily dose of apps, tech, and even a little bit of entertainment on the side. And as usual, it is an honor and a privilege to spend this time with you. Now, we've got a lot to cover because we took a couple days off of the show, but of course, this is where the replays have come in handy, because replays make it so that you get daily content whether I am doing the show or not, and that's how it's going to be, of course, throughout the rest of the week. Now, I do have, before we get into our main topics, and we have a lot of main topics today, 3 of which are rideshare related, 1 technology, and then a couple companies, and even some e-commerce a little bit in here. Hey, Ice Cream Beats, and hey, Ryan, and hey, Soul Survivor. Welcome to the show. But I want to share a little story. I have to admit, this one kind of got me, I don't normally talk about sports, but this one I had to laugh at a little bit. So, for the record, I don't like sports. And one of my least favorite games of all is baseball. I just don't like baseball. However, I live in a family that lives and breathes this stuff, particularly my brother. And, well, he was so happy because, guess what? Baseball has started again. Baseball has been able to resume playing games. There aren't any fans in the stands, but games can be played. So, you know, I guess it's kind of like with me in the movies. I mean, movies are coming out on streaming and stuff, and it's like, well, okay, I guess we can still watch movies. I'd prefer to go to the theater, but for the time being, it's going to work. It's kind of my brother's attitude. However, my brother is such a huge fan. He really, really wants to be there. And he is a big fan of the Oakland A's. You know, that's his team. Now, the Oakland A's, along with other baseball teams, are doing some very fun things to make it seem like a normal baseball game. Like, they've actually got sounds of the fans. The A's have actually got Tom Hanks to be the popcorn vendor and the hot dog seller. Because Tom Hanks' first job apparently was working for the Oakland A's, selling concessions at the game. So they had him actually record like, popcorn, get your popcorn. It's really clever. The other thing they decided to do, and this is why we're doing this little pre-show story, is that they are doing cardboard cutouts of fans in the sand. So basically, if you give like Major League Baseball $70 or something to that effect, you're going to get a cardboard cutout of yourself and put in a stand. And this, of course, helps the MLB raise some money. You will get like a complimentary ticket to the 2021 opening games, provided we can start going back to games, and you know, assuming you wear your masks, of course. But this is the funny thing. So this is what it looks like, and my brother is such a big baseball dork that, look at that, right there. That's him. That's my brother's little cardboard cutout. And so, if you look closely, when you watch MLB, my brother is on national TV in cardboard form on all the A's games. So, you know, I thought that was, it's like, okay, all right. I mean, you know, we all have our quirks, if you will. And I'm sorry, I am being notified of all the birthdays today, if you hear that chime. So, yeah, that's my brother. That's just how big of a baseball fan he is. So, you know, you watch him, you can see my brother on the A's game. So, anyway, that's just a little side story. Gives people 5 minutes to come in. But we do have a lot to talk about. So let's just jump into it. And our first major story is the title headline. And that involves, unfortunately, the death of an Uber and Lyft driver. And this is a very sad story. It's also a little complicated, and a lot of people requested that I do this, so obviously I'm going to do this one. And I was probably going to discuss it anyway, but I do feel this one, there might be a little bit more nuance to it than what initially meets the eye. The headline is, of course, attention-grabbing. It says, a COVID-19 death renews questions of Uber and Lyft's responsibility to drivers. And in the first 2 sentences, you can already see the conflict. Chuck Beckner begged his 71-year-old mother not to drive for Uber and Lyft during the pandemic. She didn't listen. Then COVID-19 took Billy Sue Matchket's life. So there's a lot to unpack in that one little section alone. But we're going to do the whole thing, or most of it anyway. Because, again, this is very, very complicated. By the way, this is who she was. Looks like a sweet old lady, and this is her son. So that's always sad. Anyway, she didn't deserve that. She was such a good person, such a good mother, Beckner said, looking at her Toyota Prius still parked in front of the mobile home they shared in El Cajon. She didn't want to be on any life-sustaining equipment, he added, fighting back tears. The COVID gave her too much brain damage, so we had the feeding tube taken out. The pandemic had dramatically raised the stakes in the years-long fight over what protections Lyft, Uber, and other gig economy companies should be required to provide workers. Aiding to long-standing wage and benefits gripes, MatchK's fate is now the nightmare scenario facing rideshare drivers everywhere. Some have recently gone beyond just wearing masks and wiping down door handles to also installing makeshift partitions in their vehicles to shield themselves from potentially infected customers. This is something, by the way, I recommend you do, and if you do this on a fair amount of basis, this is a business expense, so you can write it off at the end of the day. Advocates argue that drivers shouldn't be forced to risk death just to make ends meet, and have blasted Uber and Lyft for making it nearly impossible for drivers to collect state unemployment pay. I agree with this, although I also want to point out, and I have been very much in the minority when I say this, I don't believe Uber and Lyft drivers deserve unemployment benefits. Now, this is not a personal thing, but here's the thing. If you want to say you are independent and that you're not an employee, then you do not get unemployment benefits when these things happen. You just don't. And if you want that to change, then you will support bills like AB5 and become an employee. And then Uber and Lyft and you will be paying into the unemployment benefits pool, and you can then collect unemployment benefits when things like this happen. Of course, it's also complicated because it's not, under most circumstances, most people would be able to work. And because rideshare is considered an essential business, although essential gets taken quite a far distance these days, well, then how are you going to collect it when it's like, well, are you able to work? Yes, I just don't want to work because of the pandemic. That's a complication. Let's continue. The companies are notoriously greedy, said Terry Belk, a San Diego-based driver and volunteer organizer with the advocacy group Rideshare Drivers United. They have plenty of money, and yet they want to keep risking their drivers' lives because, I guess, we're expendable to them. I agree with both of those statements. I believe these companies are extraordinarily greedy, and I believe that we are expendable to them. So, yes, I agree with that. Lyft and Uber have long maintained that their drivers should be classified as independent contractors, largely because of the freedom workers have to set their own schedules. As such, the company have argued that workers have no legal rights to protections such as unemployment, overtime, and sick leave. This is true. Instead, they have rolled out a variety of programs, yada yada. Now, Lyft has said, as people continue to turn to rideshare throughout the COVID-19 crisis, and health and safety of our drivers and rider community is our priority. Now, Uber offered a similar statement, but of course, you'll remember a few days ago we were talking about how Lyft was selling personal protection equipment to drivers rather than giving it to them. Now, a spokesperson said that they would be giving select drivers the PPE. However, a lot of people have not gotten anything from them and instead have to go to the Lyft store to buy it themselves. So, MatchK, that's her name, the woman who died, worked for more than 3 decades at the North Island Naval Air Rework Facility on Coronado before retiring. Still, she routinely needed money and had gone through a recent bankruptcy. At first, driving for Uber and Lyft seemed like the perfect gig to help the sociable MatchK supplement her pension. However, her diabetes complicated the situation when the coronavirus started spreading throughout California. Now, her son said, I told her, please, Mom, stop. People are dying. MatchK quit driving for a few weeks after the state issued its first stay-at-home orders in March, but it wasn't long before she was back behind the wheel. She had applied for unemployment insurance, but like many rideshare drivers, had trouble securing the benefits. So one of the underlying themes of this is that had MatchK been able to secure the benefits, she might not have been driving, and there's certainly an argument to be made for there. Then around mid-June, Match K fell ill. First she had a sore throat, but it quickly progressed into coughing and a fever. A few days later, her daughter drove her to the hospital where it was soon confirmed she had COVID-19. Doctors quickly put her on heavy medication and a ventilator, marking the last time Beckner would have a fully coherent conversation with his mother. I talked to her on the phone. I told her, "Mom, I love you. You're going to pull through this. You're a strong woman." She didn't get better. Eventually, doctors told Beckner that the virus had caused considerable brain damage and she died early in July. Now, at this point, apparently he's weeping on the phone. He's saying it got worse and worse. She got what's called COVID brain. She was walking her dog and she came over to my house and we talked for like 5 minutes. That's the last I saw of her. I knew about the dangers. You hear about it all the time, but you feel it a lot more when you have somebody close that dies. I agree, seeing that I know 3 people who have died, and by the way, 2 more people have contracted this since then. And thankfully they're doing better. So, Ken Jacobs, the chair of the Labor Center of UC Berkeley, who's been closely following this issue, said, "The pandemic has put in stark relief how essential those protections are to workers." Talking about the PPE and stuff. "They are trying to maximize earnings, minimize costs. It's what they do as a business, and it's up to society and our public institutions to set the parameters within which they work." And of course, Lorena Gonzalez, chimed in. She said, "I'm outraged. I feel like these companies have been playing a game for years, using delayed tactics in courts to put off the inevitable." Now, a lot of this article is a debate about whether you're an independent contractor or an employee, but let's get back to the original question. Are Uber and Lyft to blame for this woman's death? Let's put it this way. I do agree that Uber and Lyft treat their drivers very badly. I agree that they have not taken care of them during this pandemic. I agree that they pay so little that it might compel people who are living on the edge to do this even when it's not safe. I know people who don't necessarily want to be driving right now, but they don't have a whole lot of options. They need to make money. I mean, keep in mind, we're going, let's see here, it's March, April, May, June, July, August. We're reaching 6 months, like half of a year where this thing's been going on. Maybe it could have been over a while ago if people, done common sense benign things like, I don't know, wear a mask and not flood the beaches and the bars, but we won't get into that. People do need to eat, though, and this thing has gone on and on, so you might be compelled. And in this woman's defense, she did cease driving at first, but then at some point she needed money and she went back. Now, it does say that she went through a bankruptcy. Now, I don't know what the circumstances of the bankruptcy were. A bankruptcy can signal someone who is not very good with their money. It's true. However, there are people who file for bankruptcy because of medical bills that just can simply never be paid. So bankruptcy does not automatically mean you're terrible with your money, but we do know that it wasn't managed enough to at one point you needed bankruptcy. So she did need bankruptcy. So here's where I'm going to land. I think Uber and Lyft have done an abhorrent job of protecting their drivers. I think they have. They are not very good at providing the PPE. They have absolutely made it difficult to collect unemployment benefits. Those are benefits that, by the way, under most circumstances, a driver would not be entitled to, but they are, and they have made it very difficult to collect on them. At the end of the day, though, this woman, she made a choice. She decided that she needed money and that she was willing to take the risk. She took the risk. She rolled the dice. It didn't wind up in her favor, unfortunately. As a result, she is now gone. Now, do I think this is completely her fault? No, I think there's some truth to the fact that, yes, Uber and Lyft should have been providing PPE, and hopefully her finances would have been good enough where she would not have felt compelled to go back to Uber and Lyft. But at the end of the day, she made this choice. I don't think it's completely fair to blame Uber and Lyft for this one. They didn't make her go out. Her son begged her not to drive. And while the argument can be made that, she was not making money, so she needed to go drive, guess what? She still made that choice. She still decided to make that choice. So, I'm not necessarily siding with Uber and Lyft on this one. Again, I think they could have done things that would have definitely benefited her in this situation. But I don't think they're completely to blame. At the end of the day, she made a choice. She was begged by her family not to do this. She did it anyway. And now, fortunately, she's paid. So that's my opinion. I feel very bad for this family. But she made her choice at the end of the day. It didn't work out. And it's choices that a lot of us have to make where we have to... Uber and Lyft driving is not the only job where it's like you have a higher than usual chance of getting this virus. And you kind of have to make a decision like, well, are you going to lock yourself in your house so that you don't get sick? Or are you going to go out into the real world and are you going to work and you're going to take that chance? Admittingly, most companies have done a much, much better job of protecting their employees than Uber and Lyft, but it's still a choice nonetheless. I would like to know where you land on this subject, though. Do you think this is Uber and Lyft's fault, or do you think that they are not to blame for this? Do you think this is the lady's fault? I would love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. So let's see. We probably got a lot of comments on this one, so I'm going to look at some of them. So let's see here. Let's see here. Mike Vega says, don't get the flu shots they give at drugstores. Well, I can't get a flu shot at all, actually, because I had Guillain-Barré when I was a kid, and that means flu shots are off the table for me. Ironically, maybe the vaccination might be off the table for me. I don't know. George said, if drivers are considered self-employed, drivers should be able to contribute to the unemployment insurance themselves. Yeah, I agree. I don't think people actually do that, but, that in theory you should be able to do that. Jordan says, sad story, but Uber is not on the hook for this one. All right. Mile High Cat Mom said, it's the driver's choice to drive. Okay. Let's see here. Now, George says, wait, the flu season starts. Drivers will be decimated. Uber and Lyft are not forcing anyone to drive, but the real issue is unemployment benefits here. I believe that is an issue. That is probably a big issue. But again, if you want to be independent, then you don't qualify. That's just life. That's just how this works. So if you want benefits, then you should be pushing to become employees, which a lot of people don't want. So I don't know. So anyway, and Ryan says, I agree with you. She shouldn't have done it. It's too risky to do. All right. And yeah, so, all right. Those are the thoughts people have on that. Thank you all for telling me what your thoughts on that one were. With that out of the way, let's talk about main topic number 2 after I get a sip of this water. And we got to talk a little bit about some e-commerce. Now, if there is a side job I think most gig workers should have, it's having an eBay and Amazon store. Having an e-commerce store, or Shopify even, gives you a way to have some side money without doing a whole lot. Yes, you do have to spend time uploading photos and descriptions and things like that. But otherwise, once that stuff is up, it's up. And you can drive, you can do your food delivery, and then you will sell a few items in the day. Now, the most common form of payment for these services is PayPal. And PayPal, for those of you who are not aware, was once an eBay-owned service. Now, eBay and PayPal split up. And by the way, PayPal is just killing it. They have grown way bigger since splitting from eBay. I suspect, well, I'm actually getting ahead on that one. But anyway, when they split, eBay and PayPal had a 5-year agreement that there would be no compete clause, basically for 5 years, and that PayPal and eBay would still more or less walk hand in hand with what they were doing. Well, that 5-year agreement is coming to an end, and now eBay is considering managing their own payments. So let's take a look at this from Business Insider. eBay and PayPal's 5-year operating agreement just ended, and the online marketplace is eyeing billions in new potential revenue by managing its payments in-house. eBay acquired PayPal in 2002 from Elon Musk, by the way, fun little fact, and spun it off in 2015. Now, one of the reasons I believe that they split off was because I think they were getting some heat from the government for being a monopoly. Like, eBay controlled the listings and the payment, and they could essentially fine people. They could tack like 3 or 4 fees on top of sellers and buyers, and so I think that was garnering some concern, so they split off. But PayPal was obviously very, very valuable. Let's see here. While the two companies have since operated separately from eBay's perspective, not much change. PayPal processed all of eBay's payments until 2018, when eBay started testing a small portion of its payments in-house with processing partner Adyen. But now eBay will fully roll out the payments platform it's been building for years, which it says could unlock as much as $2 billion in revenue and $500 million in operating profit in 2020. eBay's total revenue in 2019 was over $10 billion. Now, payments is so fundamental to a commerce experience, Alyssa Cutright, VP of Global Payments at eBay, told Business Insider. By having control of that, it gives us much more flexibility in how we continue to enrich the buying and seller experience, she added. Cutright joined eBay in 2016 to build out the company's payments infrastructure. Prior to joining the marketplace, she spent much of her career in payments working at PayPal, Plastic, and Square, which I like Square personally. While PayPal will still be a payment option on eBay, it will no longer earn revenue from processing eBay's transactions. To be sure, PayPal will have more freedom to pursue new business as well. Under the operating agreement, PayPal was required to give the marketplace better pricing than a handful of companies eBay considered competitors as part of a favored nations clause. So, here's what's strange to me. I don't know why this is becoming an issue at eBay. And it maybe even goes to show that eBay doesn't think too far ahead about what it is that they are doing. Because eBay is now looking at payment processing as a new source of revenue. And to be sure, payment processing is an extremely lucrative business. That's why everyone is doing it. Apple is doing it. Amazon is doing it. Google is doing it. You have Venmo. You have Square Cash. You have Scroll, if that thing's still around. That thing was horrible. But, you know, it's a very lucrative business. Here's the thing that's strange. eBay was already in this business when they owned PayPal. And obviously, they did not utilize it as well as they could have. And then one day they decided they didn't want to be part of this business anymore. They sold PayPal, and then they, by the way, saw PayPal stock way eclipse their own stock. And I think they're definitely getting it in their head that, you know, hey, maybe we made a mistake, and they want to get back into it. As they say, that eBay has been testing management payments for over 42,000 sellers and processes 4.7 billion in volumes. It's a very, and of course, when you have, with those payment processing, you have payment data, which was the main reason eBay kept PayPal for so long. Now again, I think eBay sold PayPal, like they split, because I believe there was some anti-competitive, antitrust concerns going on with the government, which didn't do much because they split, but then PayPal was still exclusive to eBay for 5 years anyway. So, but now eBay wants to get back into it, but you just have to look and wonder, why did they sell PayPal in the first place? You know, they sold PayPal to essentially do what PayPal was doing again 5 years later. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe the whole thing was like, okay, they got some pocket change, but then they realized all the money they were leaving on the table. I don't know. And maybe now that PayPal is so integrated into eBay, maybe eBay can now create another payment processing service. They can keep this one and show that, hey, see, there's competition on our site. Like, we don't own PayPal anymore. And maybe they can get away with keeping this one. I don't know. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. eBay tends to sell a lot of things that they tend to regret. I wonder if they're going to regret selling the StubHub and Classifieds at 1.2. Well, anyway, that's kind of what's going on right now. I would like to know, what do you all think about this? Do you think eBay should never have sold PayPal in the first place? Do you think they sold it just because they were forced to? What do you think of eBay's new payment managing system and programs? Do you think it will be a big thing? I would love to know. Comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. And as always, claim responsibly. Now let me look at some of these comments. Nobody really left a comment for that one. So with that, since no one's left a comment, we will move on to main topic number 3. And the third main topic is going to be very, very sobering for those of you who are watching who might be out of a job. And here's the thing. Many of us are in that boat. Many of us have lost jobs. I, for the record, lost a job a few weeks ago. I have a new one that I'm starting soon, though, so I am going to be fine. Thank goodness. But a lot of us have lost jobs, and it might be a very, very long time till we get some jobs, because that's the way recessions work. And we are very much in a recession, borderline depression. If you want to know how bad it is, LinkedIn is cutting nearly 1,000 jobs. Now think about this. LinkedIn. For those of you who are not aware of what LinkedIn is a social media website for jobs. You basically create a little virtual resume. And you can find work and people can reach out to you. And I have been using LinkedIn quite a bit the last few months. I think a lot of people have been using LinkedIn. They're going to LinkedIn and they're trying to find jobs. And that's just what they're doing. Now, here's the thing that's scary. LinkedIn is there to help you get jobs, but LinkedIn themselves are now cutting nearly 1,000 jobs, which really makes you wonder if the site that I use to find work is cutting jobs. What does that say about the job market? Let's look at this article. LinkedIn added its name Tuesday to the list of employers announcing layoffs for white-collar jobs as coronavirus losses continue to ripple beyond low-wage work to better-paying jobs in auto manufacturing, technology, and consulting. The announcement from LinkedIn that it was laying off about 960 roles. I don't know why that's maybe I think there's a problem with this site. Let's see if this works. Let's see here. The announcement from LinkedIn that it was laying off these people also signals that hopes for a quick hiring rebound for professionals may be dimming. The site, which caters more to professional workers, earns its revenue from fees paid by recruiters, job posting, and other sources. Quote, LinkedIn is not immune to the effects of the global pandemic, CEO Ryan Roslansky wrote in a note to employees. LinkedIn's business unit that sells access to its recruiting platform as well as job postings, quote, continues to be impacted as fewer companies, including ours, need to hire at the same volume they did previously. LinkedIn, which is owned by Microsoft, shared the news the day before the tech giant's scheduled quarterly earnings report. On Wednesday, Microsoft said LinkedIn was, quote, negatively impacted by the weak job market and reductions in advertising spending, but its revenue increased 10%. So, continue to read this article, a lot of people say this is not a good sign, this is really bad for the jobs environment, and I agree. Again, we're talking about LinkedIn. This isn't like Twitter or Facebook where you go on to dick around for like an hour or two. This is a place you go to find work. You go there to find work. And if they're losing revenue, that they are eliminating almost 1,000 jobs, that And it was stated in this article, their money comes from payment fees and advertisements from companies who want to advertise those jobs. Which means those companies are paying LinkedIn a heck of a lot less because they are not posting as much jobs. They're not advertising work as much. And now people who worked at LinkedIn, I guess, can use LinkedIn to find their own work. It's going to get pretty scary. This is a sign of many signs that the economy might be in huge long-term trouble. This also means that Uber and Lyft and Instacart and DoorDash, they all might be taking on a lot more independent contractors because the jobs just are not out there. It's a scary time to be unemployed. I'm so thankful that I found a job when I did, because when I lost my job a few weeks ago, and maybe I'll share the story sometime. It's actually quite an interesting one, but I won't share it now. I was preparing for not working for most of the year. So anyway, I am curious, what do you all think about this? Are you employed, unemployed? Do you use LinkedIn to look for jobs? Has it ever worked out for you? Whatever, I'd like to know. Comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. And as always, flame responsibly. So let's see here. Now Ryan says, and this is in regards to the eBay topic, I personally do think that they only sold PayPal because they were forced to, and that eBay likely really wanted to keep PayPal. I agree. I agree with that. By the way, if no one's given this video a thumbs up yet, I would really appreciate that. The thumbs up and the shares and the likes, they really help this channel. But with that out of the way, let's talk about main topic number 4. And with main topic number 4, I don't know how many of you are subscribed to HBO Max and Peacock, but I have to say I'm really enjoying HBO Max. I think I'm now using HBO Max way more than I'm using everything else. I'm using it more than Netflix. I'm using it more than Disney Plus. Peacock I have barely used. I've paid for the year up front because I figured I would need to have it for my channels, but I've not watched much of it. I think I pretty much binge watched The Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat, and I watched a John Goodman movie called Matinee that I've been meaning to watch for a very long time, and that was on there. And so I've been using it, but not nearly as much. But one thing that's really strange though is that a lot of the movies that were used as selling points to sign up for these services have been pulled and are continuing to be pulled. For example, HBO Max lost a lot of the DC universe movies a month after it launched. They are also losing the Harry Potter movies in a week or so. And no, they're not taking them down because of J.K. Rowling and her Twitter account. They are removing the service because they are going to go somewhere else. Peacock, likewise, is losing some high-profile movies as well. They are going to be losing the Matrix movies, which Warner Brothers owns, so they'll probably go to HBO Max. And they'll be losing the Jurassic Park movies. Which begs a question, what on earth is going on? Why are you getting rights to these movies that you're using to sell the service, only to take them away a couple weeks later? Now, to let you know where I stand, I own all these movies on disc. I don't sweat this stuff because I own the discs. Guess what? My wife wanted to watch The Great Gatsby a couple nights ago. We pulled the disc off the shelf and we watched The Great Gatsby in 3D. If I ever want to watch Detective Pikachu, I own it. It will not be taken off. Those movies are just sitting there, obviously. I also have a stack of movies here. I'm surrounded by movies. Anyway, so here's what this article says, and it gives us a little peek into what's going on. When media giants like Warner Media and NBC Universal announced they would launch their own streaming services, it seemed like a bid to consolidate their own TV and movie catalogs into one platform to keep them out of the hands of rivals like Netflix. Now that those services are out in the world, however, it seems that's not entirely the case. It's true that the services have snatched up IP synonymous with their respective parent companies, dropping millions of dollars for the likes of Friends, which was produced by Warner Brothers TV and is now streaming on Max, and The Office, which originally aired on NBC and is set to leave Netflix by the end of the year for Peacock. But Max and Peacock have also made headlines since they launched because some major movies are already leaving their services. The Jurassic Park trilogy, originally distributed by NBC Universal Pictures, will move from Peacock, which launched last week, to Netflix on August 1st, so 4 more days. And all 8 Harry Potter movies, originally distributed by Warner Brothers, are set to depart Max on August 25th. Rights deals can be complicated. Many were negotiated years before the streaming services launched. But still, it seems that Max and Peacock are not following the lead of Disney+, which launched in November with a clearly stated goal of becoming the definitive platforms for all things Disney. Now, every company wants a foundational offering of the best of their franchises that help to build a brand, said Tuna Amobi, an analyst with research firm CFRA. Peacock won't ultimately let anyone else have The Office, for instance. But while Disney has taken a comprehensive approach to bring in everything on one platform, others will look at it as a case-by-case business. The streaming industry analyst Business Buyer spoke with didn't set the loss of some high-profile IP as a deal-breaker for many subscribers. Quote, in the short term, as opposed to marketing these movies, they'll market something else that's exclusive, and that's the reality of working your way through these deals. So, here's basically what's being said when it comes to these movies. Harry Potter, for example, despite what's going on with J.K. Rowling, is a hugely valuable IP, and it's going to be hugely valuable for a long time. Now, here's the thing. I don't know exactly how much this is watched on a daily basis. So on paper, it might make sense for it to be on HBO Max. You could drive people to the platform. But maybe it doesn't get the traffic that you think it does. And then another company comes along and says, hey, we want to give you $20 million for the exclusive rights to that for a couple of years. And Warner Brothers might be looking at it and saying, you know, this really doesn't get the traffic people think it does, and that $20 million might be worth more to us than keeping it on this platform, because we think that $20 million will net us more money than it will net us subscribers. So they sell the rights to Harry Potter for a brief period of time. And that's just kind of the reality of how the movie business works. And that's what's going on. Now, again, it's frustrating to people to have to, they sign up for a movie service, they want this particular property there, and then it goes away, and they have to get another streaming service to watch them. My solution to that is pretty simple. If you really like it that much, where you have to have a version of it so that you can watch it, buy the physical media. Buy the DVDs or the Blu-rays and watch it whenever you want. Because here's the thing. Look, it's convenient to have it there. Me and my wife decided we wanted to watch Mystic River a week ago. I have the DVD. It's somewhere. And I decided, I could either go search for the DVD. Well, let's just look at HBO Max. Is it there? Oh, it's there. Okay, let's just stream it. So it's convenient, but if it wasn't on HBO Max, do you think I was going to lose my shirt? No, I was going to go pull the disc off the shelf and we were going to watch it. That is the big advantage of physical media. So if you don't want these things to go away, buy yourself some physical media. Anyway, I would like to know what all of you think about these things leaving so soon. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one. All right, so let's see. I'm pretty sure. In regards to the LinkedIn, Jordan says, bad news for white-collar workers, but I think people are less likely to change companies right now due to the economy. You're probably right on that. But if you lose your job, you probably want to get another job, and that's where it's going to get scary. Ryan says, I have HBO Max, but I don't have Peacock. Well, you should get Peacock. There's a free version. Now, Jordan says, sounds like a classic bait and switch, which it very well might be. Ryan says, also speaking of HBO Max, you hear that 10 episodes of Looney Tunes cartoons will be included in the Bugs Bunny Blu-ray. Yeah, I'm going to do a separate video on the Bugs Bunny Blu-ray set. I'm actually not very impressed with that. And I'll tell you why in that video. And Ryan also says, do you have any of the Harry Potter movies on 4K Blu-ray or Blu-ray 3D? I have the Fantastic Beasts movies and Harry Potter 7, which is really 2 movies. I have those in 3D. I don't have any of them in 4K though, and really, from what I'm reading, it's not worth it because the first two Harry Potter movies look really good in 4K here, but the rest were all filmed digitally, so it looks only slightly better. Anyway, so there's that. And with that out of the way, let me take a sip of this real quick. Let's move on to main topic number 5. And our 5th main topic, and this is going to be very interesting because I've kind of done my own surveys on this one, but it's been like a little while since I've asked, so it might be a good time to reapproach the subject. But with the pandemic, things are obviously scary. And by the way, the pandemic is not under control. It is way out of control. And the reason it's way out of control, I'm sorry to say, is because we're all being a bunch of nimrods. We're not wearing our masks. We're flooding the bars, the beaches. We're doing family gatherings when we shouldn't. I mean, there are so many little things we could be doing to beat this thing back that we're not doing. That's kind of scary. But anyway, that said, even if we were doing the things that we were doing, there was that big question mark. Would people feel comfortable using Uber and Lyft again? Because here's the thing. You could definitely make things safer. If people follow the rules, it's relatively safe to go to Disneyland. It's relatively safe to go to the theaters. It's relatively safe to go to a professional game. If we did the things we were supposed to doing, we could do some of these things again on a limited basis. Likewise, you can do things that would make Uber and Lyft feel relatively safe. Now, in all these situations, it's not 100%. You're still taking somewhat of a chance, but you can do it. You can make it seem a little safer. Well, the Drive has done some surveying, and some studies have been shown about whether or not people feel safe using Uber and Lyft. And, well, the results are not pretty because, according to this article, 75% of Americans fearful of using Uber and Lyft now, maybe forever. Now, on the forever thing, I will comment on this right now. Always, always, always question mark. They say forever. Because you know what I remember was forever tainted? Flying in an airplane. 9/11 hit, and all these articles, like, 70, 80% of people said they are fearful of flying, maybe forever, and yet we got back to normal. We're flying again. Well, we were flying again, then this thing hit. So let's just take that comment and put like a pin there. Know that we are in the midst of a pandemic, and people are scared. Of course they're scared, but it doesn't mean that this will be a forever thing, but they are definitely afraid now. So here's what the Drive says. When last we checked in on the ride-sharing biz's post-virus prognosis, the outlook for Uber stockholders wasn't pretty. In May, surveys found that more than half of Americans were anxious about returning to the backseat of a rideshare, and that nearly a quarter plan to swear off ridership entirely. 2 months later, things don't look much better, as another pair of surveys have found that a significant proportion of Americans may still never ride a rideshare again. Car Gurus, one of the original surveyors cited in our May story, ran a follow-up survey in June that asked 779 Americans for their plans regarding transportation during and after the ongoing COVID-19 crisis. And so, of course, it's a small sample, but, it's not exactly science. You just ask as many people as you can what they think, and you record their questions, and this is what they said. It found that 29.7% of Americans plan to reduce their usage of rideshare, up from 28% in April. And that while a small number have backed down their pledge to cease hiring Ubers entirely, the change is minimal, down to 9.6% from April's 10%. Of this group of respondents, 58% plan to substitute personal vehicle use for ride-sharing, signaling a possible worsening of the U.S. traffic problem. Because, when more people take Ubers, we have a bigger traffic problem. A similar survey by ADT found that the majority of Americans are concerned about the cleanliness of rideshares, with 57.6% of the 1,005 surveyed reported moderate to extreme worries about whether rideshares are sanitary. Only 6.1% reported apathy towards the matter, though they represent a small minority of Americans, most of whom ADT found to be less than friendly toward riding Lyft or Uber even after the health orders lift. Just 25.1% of ADT's respondents said they were moderately to extremely likely to use ride shares in the future, where 59.3% plan to heavily reduce their ridership. Precisely 15.6% swore to never hail a rideshare again, and no matter how Uber's board members want to frame it, losing close to 1/6 of their customer base in a matter of months is an ugly change in fortune. Perhaps ride-sharing services could tempt some lost customers back by appealing to the 70.6% that will only consider riding again if vehicles are sanitized between passengers, though it sounds like those people might want to look into something called a taxi instead. And that's the thing you have to keep in mind. Like, how can you really be sure that these things are being cleaned in between rides? You can't. You're kind of taking it on a leap of faith. But here's my thoughts. I have no doubt that rideshare is going to be suffering for a long, long time. And I do believe more people will go back to rideshare than won't, though, just because that's how nature is. In fact, when I did my survey, my own little unscientific survey, if you will. Wow, my eye all of a sudden is itching really bad. I remember posting out this question to my live streamers. I was doing like nightly live streams. I was bored. I was worried. We were just hanging out, if you will. And there was one night in particular we started getting into just how bad Uber and Lyft was, and people were sharing their grievances, their frustrations. There was no work. They weren't being protected. And I asked everyone there, and there were like 70 people live with me at the time. Not quite as much as, definitely not as much as we have now. We have less now. You know, that's what happens. Anyway, there was about 70 people there. And I asked a question. Hey, considering that we are now at the point where you are completely screwed, Uber and Lyft have hung you out to dry, and they screwed you, they put all their excrement in a bag, and they left you holding it. How do you feel about it? How many of you are going to go back to rideshare? Now, you would think, considering everything, the vast majority of people would say, I'm not. But instead, the vast majority of people said, with the exception of like one person, they all said, I intend to return to rideshare when this is all safe to do so. I might have had a little bit of a meltdown at that point where I pretty much said, are you kidding me? This is why you will never get paid any more money, because they have got you by the cahoots and they have not let go. And if this isn't going to make you leave the industry, then what will? Would you have to get shot and lose your arm, and would you still try to justify driving for Uber? I admit I was a little frustrated that night. So it's interesting to read an article where the writers might actually say, no, I'm just going to take a break. But this is just how it is. I think at the end of the day, most people who are fearful, they will eventually do this again. They will eventually do this again, because that's just the way things are. But anyway, I would like to know what all of you think about this. Are you going to use an Uber and Lyft in the future? Do you continue to use it? I would love to know. Comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. And as always, think responsibly. All right, let's look at some of these comments. And let's see here. Jordan says, as if taxis are going to sanitize between riders. There you go. And Mark says, hiya, Kevin, not going back yet. All right. Well, those are our two comments on the matter as of this moment. With that said, let's move on to main topic number, I think this is 6. Let's see. 1, 2. Yeah, this is 6. This is 6. And then we have one more rideshare related topic after this one. But one of the things that's been a blessing about this pandemic is that I have been getting a lot of reading done. I've been reading J.K. Rowling's mystery series, Gravity's Rainbow. I've been reading some historical works like the Hamilton book and Mein Kampf by Hitler, which is a very, 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 very scary book. Very scary book. It's actually kind of scary. It's frightening how this guy was completely transparent about what he planned to do and that people followed him anyway. That's, whew. But anyway, most of these books are read on one of two formats: paper or they're read on my Nook, my Barnes & Noble Samsung Nook tablet, which I believe is my favorite device. And I also have their big tablet for my graphic novels and stuff like that. Well, even though it's my favorite reading device, it's my favorite e-reader, apparently that's not enough, because Barnes & Noble are no longer selling their tablets. And granted, that is what these were. They were tablets. They called them e-readers, but they were tablets. But they're no longer selling them, which is a shame. So according to Good e-Reader, Barnes & Noble had an extensive tablet portfolio. They had their own Nook Tablet 7 and Nook Tablet 10.1, which is amazing, by the way, in addition to their deal with Samsung for a number of Samsung Galaxy Tab for Nook. They also had a number of cases and other accessories. It looks like the bookseller might be getting out of the tablet business altogether and have removed them from their website. The only devices they are currently marketing are their e-readers, the Nook Glow Lite 3 and the Nook Glow Lite Plus 7.8. Barnes & Noble had a number of tablets they subcontracted to other companies, the Nook Tablet 7, which competed against Amazon Fire 7, and Nook Tablet 10.1. They had a few generations of these devices and have never really had enough market share to make this viable, which I agree with. The Samsung relationship was first started around 6 years ago when Barnes & Noble decided to stop designing and manufacturing tablets themselves and signed a multi-year deal with Samsung. Samsung would white label their line of Android tablets and preloaded all the Nook apps on it. Barnes & Noble had to order hundreds of thousands of units, and since they never sold that many, they took millions of dollars in losses, which is why they still sold outdated tablets for years after they became irrelevant. As you know, Barnes & Noble was sold to a private equity firm, and the new CEO took the reins, who has decades of book-selling experience. I bet they looked at the tablets and looked at the sales and said, why the F are we still doing this? There might be some true. There might be a lot of truth to that. Because, yeah, Barnes & Noble does have a new owner in town, a new sheriff, if you will. And he's more of a traditional bookseller. Now, there have been rumors that the Nook might be discontinued. For example, Pocket Now had this article, Barnes & Noble Nook to be no more. And they write, Barnes & Noble Nook digital offerings have not been winners for the companies. Rather, far to the contrary, from the provision of its own Android-based software before having Samsung build some, to the locked-down ecosystem of the company's content stores, it just didn't add up for customers to flock over from the Kindle. Nook-related losses have been trailing off recently, so that means that more people are buying Nook books. And CEO Ron Boyer said in a press release accompanying the earnings report that he was, quote, pleased with the progress that had been made to reduce Nook losses. However, there's still a lot of questions. Now, what these two articles tell me side by side is that, yes, and by the way, this is one of the Nooks that I have. I love this device. It's really, really good. They are probably going to scale back. They won't be doing tablets anymore. They'll just be doing the strict Nook things. And I believe that in terms of for tablets and everything, they do have a Nook app. And that will just be what people use. You can download the Nook app off the Apple Store, off the Microsoft Store, whatever, and you would have your library in that app. And that's kind of where it's heading anyway, because the only ebooks devices that really, really took off were Kindle and Kobo. Most companies tried their own tablet device. It didn't succeed very well. Barnes & Noble hung in there longer than most because guess what? They're a bookstore. So, of course, they want to try to make that work, but it never really took off the way they had hoped. And so now, I think their digital business is just going to be like a little side thing. I think it's too big to just get rid of, but it's not big enough to continue justifying putting a lot of money into it. And that's where we are right now. So anyway, I'd like to know, what are your thoughts on this? Do any of you own a Nook? Do you have an e-tablet or ebook reader? Which one is your favorite and why? I would love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. All right, let's see which collection of yours is bigger, books or DVDs, Blu-rays? Books and not books, DVD movies. Way more movies than books. Now, Jordan says, George says, if we have a vaccination vaccine or treatment, I will go back to ride sharing, okay? And Jordan says, some drivers are so dedicated they would be back driving with one arm. You're probably right. And Ryan says, I probably won't use Uber again until whenever I can take my trip to California, which of course would have to be well after the pandemic is over. I agree. All right, folks. So we are going to do, I have 2 more topics, but we're going to do 1. I'm going to save this other topic for tomorrow because it's kind of a big one, and I think it should actually be an opening story. But with that said, let's talk about main topic number 7. Now, you want to talk about going back to rideshare, because here's what's going to be interesting. A lot of us people are driving their little clunky cars now for rideshare because rideshare does not pay a lot of money. So you know what? You don't want to be putting a lot of money into your vehicle to drive Uber and Lyft. You don't want to be like these idiots who spend thousands of dollars and have like a car payment on a fancy car just to do rideshare. That is a big, big no-no. Use a car that's paid off, that you might replace in a few years anyway. Never, ever, ever buy a new vehicle for this. But the problem with these old cars is that they are polluters. And the economy is becoming, not the economy, the environment is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. Especially now that we took a lot of cars off the road for like a few months. We could see how great the air looked when people weren't driving. And Lyft, I believe, was the first company to say that they were going to go all electric in several years. And that you would have to have an electric vehicle to drive rideshare. Well, California says that that's too long. And they are considering forcing Uber and Lyft to go electric much, much sooner. So here's the story from Gizmodo. California's Air Resources Board submitted an ambitious proposal in recent days that would put a cap on emissions from vehicles being used for rideshare apps like Uber and Lyft, Wired reports. And while these companies have an infamously tumultuous history with labor regulators in their home state, they seem significantly more receptive to this push to go green than they are to sufficiently compensate their workforce. That's interesting. Yeah, that's a funny thing. Like, yeah, these companies are like, they're making a big deal about how they're eco-friendly, but they don't want to talk about how much they pay their workforce. Well, the proposal would mandate that 60% of miles traveled by Uber and Lyft vehicles be in electric vehicles by 2030. To achieve this lofty goal, the board estimates that roughly 1/3 of rideshare vehicles would need to be electric. California, that's a tall order, to put it lightly. In 2018, electric vehicles only made up 1% of miles traveled for ride-sharing services, only 59% more to go. In their proposal, the board suggested that companies like Uber and Lyft would need to offer incentives for their contractors to make the switch and particularly target their highest mileage drivers. Lyft, which earlier this year committed to convert all of its driver vehicles to electric by 2030, welcomed the stricter regulation because they've already committed to it. And they said, we think that CARB should continue to be aggressive. So, while Uber has not made any similar comments regarding electric vehicles, a company spokesperson told Wire that Uber looks forward to continuing to engage with CARB and that it supports California's clean mile standards as a first-of-its-kind performance-driven standard. Now, here's the thing. Why are Uber and Lyft in favor of this? Because there's a lot of drivers who will have to quit. They can't afford to just buy a new vehicle. Here's why Uber and Lyft are excited about this. They get to play the good guys. They get to say, hey, we are working with California. We want to go green. We want to help the environment. We want to kill global warming. And it looks good for them. Here's the other thing. 10 years, well, yeah, it's about 10 years, 9.5 at this point, is a long time. A lot of people who are driving Uber and Lyft now might not still be driving in 10 years from now. And these people, and new people will come in with newer vehicles, and more new vehicles are hybrids and electrics now. And if you have to start coercing your drivers to start buying new vehicles to comply with a health mandate, guess what happens? There are newer and nicer vehicles when you call an Uber and Lyft. So they win one way or another, and that's why they're pushing it. Where, of course, it's going to hurt is with you folks out there, those of you who have those gas guzzlers. And hey, the car isn't much, but it gets you what you need to do, and it helps you with your rideshare. you have to buy a new vehicle now, and they don't pay enough to justify that for the most part. So you're either going to quit or you're going to be buying a new vehicle and you're going to be taking a bath every month. A bath every month. You know, my dad was like, when he was in Chicago last year, he Ubered everywhere, and he would ask the drivers, how much money do you make? And frequently, because they all use like the rental programs, people would say like, well, I drive Monday and Tuesday to pay off the car, and then I'm driving the rest of the week for my family. And it's like, so you're spending a third of your time driving just to pay off the car? That doesn't seem super viable, but who knows, maybe it is. I would like to know though, what do you all think of this story? Do you think California is right to do this? And if so, do you think it's reasonable, and do you think people are going to upgrade their vehicles? I would love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. All right, now then, let's look at the last few comments. So Jordan says, I never got the hype around e-readers. If I wanted to read something on a tablet, I would use my iPad. Well, the hype is like, because here's what some people don't understand. I know tablets do everything, but I'm one of those people who it's like, hey, I am perfectly fine with having one device that does one thing extremely well, rather than have a device that does everything at like 30%. That's kind of the thing. Now granted, tablets and reading ebooks is not exactly a stressful thing to do, but it was just always nice to know, like, okay, that's my reading device, and also they lasted a very, very long time on a charge. So that's kind of what it is. But anyway, Jordan also says, you definitely don't want to buy an expensive luxury SUV to do premium Lyft rides. No, you do not. I pity the fool who has an expensive luxury SUV to do Lyft rides. George says, a brand new Corolla is the best investment to drive for ride sharing and deliveries. Even a used Corolla that you can pay off relatively quickly. Corollas, I mean, heck, I have a Corolla, and it survived the Uber and Lyft years, that's for certain. Anyway, folks, that is where we are going to end this episode. Thank you so much for joining me once again. If you miss any of the topics, we will have replays throughout the next several days on the topics and throughout the weekend. And until then, I'd like to know what you think about any of these topics. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.